There we go. Now we're recording. Take two. Maybe. Should probably turn this back on too. There we go.
The people of this city have spirit, I'll give them that. They've not lost the will to fight. I can imagine how torn you must feel, looking at that sky. Knowing what it means to everyone. And that you're responsible. If you're thinking of coming clean, don't. It might make you feel better, but it would make things 100 times worse for them. They're better off not knowing. You're in a corner, and there doesn't seem to be any obvious way out. That doesn't mean it's over. However hopeless it seems, you haven't lost yet. I remember looking up at the sky like this before. Being caught up in a strange kind of calm. It was after we realized we were responsible for the flood. When we resolved to journey to the source by taking our own lives. One last sacrifice. One last fight. One last failure. And then the Oracle appeared and, well, you know the rest. There were times in the years and decades that followed when I wondered if we might not have been better off just letting the rejoining happen. That we'd made one last mistake. But seeing that giant Talos stir to life cured me of any doubts I still had. Always we took the burden of fighting upon ourselves. That's what heroes do, isn't it? So we never had the chance to see anything like that. Our people coming together as one. To think that their hope still burns so bright. That they were still so eager to live, they would lift up their fellows, one on top of the other, till they reached the sky. No. We made the right decision. And I can finally feel proud of the part we played in helping this world survive. Well, come on then. As I thought. What happened between us was no coincidence. My story may be finished, but the fates have gifted me a minor role in yours.
Minor?
I suspected as much the moment I realized you could hear me. But it's hard not to doubt yourself when you're the man who caused the flood. I was afraid to do anything more than watch for fear of making things even worse. But no longer. After all, the path I once walked is now yours to finish. For what it's worth, I cast my lot with yours. If you need a push, I'll be right there behind you. If you lose control, I'll do my best to stop you. So, let us be about it, hero.
I mean, if I kept grudges for everyone who tried to kill me in this game, I would have very few friends.
You were up here all alone, brooding and fretting and wallowing in your woes. But look at you, grinning at nothing like a pollen-drunk pixie. Look at what you've done to your ether. It's a mess. And you have cracks running all through that pretty soul of yours. My poor little sapling. Whatever am I to do with you? Shall I yield up my throne? You could claim it. Cut ties with the mortal world? Hide away in the castle?
Funnily enough, I considered that option, but no. It's too temporary of a solution.
Fix the problem? But would it really matter? If any pesky heroes come calling with steel and magic, all of Il Meg will rise up in your defense. My crown and scepter are yours, if you want them. What? Don't give me that look! Of course I knew before I asked that you'd never ever heed such a wicked suggestion. And besides, what would become of my precious and ephemeral flower? Oh, my dear beloved sapling. You are lost, confused, and have precious little time to gather your wits. Your kind is always so preoccupied with what lies ahead, and so we muddle your vision with fog and glamour. But such trickery is easy to see through. Stand very, very still. Think not of where you need to go, but where you are right now at this moment, at this time, in this place. Our cairn of crystal. From shadowed hood he watched you go, his ruby eyes with warmth aglow. See yourself as he saw you, and that shall be the clearest clue. You stand in his garden, dear sapling. Ask his flowers what they know, and you will surely find an answer. But what will you do with it, I wonder? I'll be watching and waiting. Waiting and watching.
Ugh. There's my answer. Did not expect to see you on your feet so soon. Are you searching for tomorrow? What do I know of the Crystal Exarch? I'm happy to share, but I fear there'd be no surprising revelations. As many in this city could tell you, he's a man of wisdom and compassion, and many untold secrets. But none can doubt his generosity. When the Crystarium was being constructed, he even allowed folk to plunder the tower for resources. He's imposed no restriction upon a simple one. No one except the Exarch is permitted to dwell within the spire. Many seasons past, a comrade of mine was bold enough to ask the reason why. The Exarch merely smiled and said, because one day the Crystal Tower may vanish as suddenly as it arrived. Frickin' Loggins. I swear to God. I don't think this qualifies as a filler. This feels more like a breather section. Like what the earlier section of the desert probably should have felt like. Yeah, it's just Omega, or no, it's not. It's actually... Hang on. There, that's his name. Lord, good to see you awake and alert, my friend. What's this about? You're not writing the Exarch's memoirs, are you? Oh, god dang it. There. I'm not sure how much I can tell you, considering we avoid asking too many questions. Unspoken rule and all that. If anyone has fresh insights to share, it'd be Captain Lina, I'd say. Oh yeah, by the way, if my internet goes out, it's because we're having a thunderstorm right now. Just as an FYI. She lost her parents to an eater attack not long before she was born, and the Exarch saw to her upbringing. Outward appearances aside, those two are like grandfather and granddaughter. I imagine the news of his predicament hit her doubly hard. Not that our proud captain would ever let it show. If you do decide to talk to Lina, she'll be at her usual post in the accessor gate. Okay. That's a good question, Venters. So if I were to, rate the best MMOs out there right now, in my opinion, in no order, this is just thinking about them, World of Warcraft, FF14, Guild Wars 2, Star Trek Online, I guess a nod to Asheron's Call, even though it doesn't exist anymore, and ESO. So those big five, counting the concurrent ones. Of those, Lotro I don't think deserves to be in the big five, no. Lotro is a good MMO, but it is not a great MMO. I think that's the simplest way I can explain that. I would definitely not put EVE Online in that list, but that's because I'm not interested in that type of content. I prefer developer-generated content over player-generated content. It's just a preference thing. Of those, WoW has been at the top for me for a long time. It has obviously fallen substantially since I haven't played it in the better part of 8 months, or no, longer than that at this point. Almost a year now. The thing is, WoW is still, even now, by far my favorite game to play. The raw core combat, gameplay, interface, add-ons, HUD, all of the various aspects of gameplay and game design in WoW are, in my opinion, the best of the MMOs, the best of the greats. The problem is the story has peaked, to put it bluntly, and in my opinion, it's at the point now where I have to add massive asterisks to the story of World of Warcraft. You could argue those were always there, but in my own terminology, WoW has always been a net positive story, and it isn't anymore. And that, I mean, I can enjoy a game's gameplay to the end of time, but if it doesn't have a story to back it up, my interest is always just going to kind of, you know? There's still good story in BFA, But the fact that I have to add that asterisk is just kind of, you know? FF14, I have almost the exact opposite problem. As much as I made a gripe about Ranjit and about the time dilation, I have no other complaints about the story of this game. Not any big complaints. Of this expansion, I should be more clear. And as I think I've hinted at before, this expansion has been pulling me in quite a bit. The problem is I still fundamentally don't enjoy the gameplay. I feel like I can get used to it. I feel like I can do a decent job of it. I don't know. I mean, I didn't wipe several times in the raid we just did, or the trial we just did. So maybe I'm just talking out my ass here. But I do feel like I can at least get acclimated to the gameplay, but I can never really feel like I'm actually enjoying it. Now, that also, it is worth noting, in the interest of fairness, that might be a consequence of the specific classes that I have, by coincidence, ended up playing. Astrologian, Paladin, and Red Mage are the three big ones I've been playing and I've been pushing. And maybe that's just the problem here. And I mean, I liked Red Mage, but I've played around with Red Mage a bit after the expansion, and I'm not sure I like Red Mage as much anymore. It feels like, thanks to the mana changes and the change in flow of the class, it's a lot more limited. And yeah, it's FF14, one way or another, will always have the tech... Well, I should always... It still has the tech debt problem. And that's an issue. That's an issue. We've talked about it before. There's basically no real good answer to that issue. So you can see why, when being asked, like, where does WoW sit? Where do the big MMOs sit? I'm kind of torn. If I could just have FF14's story with WoW's gameplay, I would be very happy right now. But I know other people wouldn't like that, and I don't want to force that on other people. I've been thinking about poking at Dragoon. I've been thinking about pushing Samurai. Like, I enjoyed Samurai back in the day. I really did. And Red Mage was... Okay, Red Mage was fun. I still preferred Samurai, but the reason I pushed Red Mage is it has a res, and it has a heal. And that was the reason I pushed Red Mage, right there, in a nutshell. I wanted to be as much of a catch-all class as I could, and this is basically it. Can they resolve the tech debt truly? It is possible, but damned unlikely. That is, as I've talked about extensively, tech debt is a very real, very huge problem. And there's no good answer. They would what would have to happen is they would basically have to take the general amount of time that an expansion takes and just use that time. Why is Nanamo there? Use that development and budget time just fixing the engine, fixing and overhauling the netcode and the servers, and basically scrolling through or outright replacing the spaghetti logic. I don't know, like, the biggest problem with tech debt, really, and this applies not just to video games, but to all technology or software development. The biggest problem with tech debt is there's always going to be an issue with how much it's actually worth it. Let me use a non-video game example. I actually know someone who works at a job where they have massive tech debt issues. It's with regards to software that operate... What is Nanamo doing? Oh my god. It's with massive issues regarding... They develop software for robots. Robots that, like, are operating in pharmacies, okay? And their software is really out of date. And so they just kind of keep band-aiding and fixing it, to a case-specific circumstance, rather than just going back and fixing all the software. Why? Because in order to go back and actually fix all of the software would take time and money, and every time it comes up, they do a little, feasibility meeting, feasibility study. How much would this cost? How much time and effort will this take? And each time they say, that's just not worth it. That's just going to take too much time and effort. And every now and again, they'll reach out to their customers and say, do you want us to try and spend the time and money resolving the tech debt? And the customers always say, nah. This is the biggest issue with tech debt. It is a problem, but solving the problem is almost universally not considered worth the time and effort to do so. What will usually happen in these kind of cases is someone will just come along and just come up with something new. And the new thing will then replace the old thing, and the tech debt remains forever unresolved. And again, this is true in general software development, not just gaming development. And that's why I say FF14 will probably never fix its tech debt issue, because that's how the industry works in general. Yeah, what Zira's telling, that's actually a great example. If you really want to look into it, it is probably scary how many industries and organizations use extremely old hardware and software, still, to this very day. Anyways, sorry. Point being... Sorry, we got off on a tangent here. Sorry, the point being that I don't think that's something that's going to be fixed in FF14. And that's just the way it is. But I do, as I've always said, I will push myself through a game I don't enjoy because of a good story. And I do very much enjoy Shadowbringers' story. So, woo! Yeah, tech debt itself also has tech debt. It's a layered problem. It just gets worse and worse over time. So, moving on. Oh, I should stop being a red mage. Yes, air traffic control tech is actually a really good example of what I'm talking about. Oh, hang on. Someone said I don't have my AoEs, don't I? Yeah, I do. Right here. It's my C button. I can't demonstrate because I have nothing to target, but it's there. Anyways, boop. Was there something else you needed? If you've come for results of my research into the persistent light, I'm afraid there's not much to tell yet. Records pertaining to the Exarch? Well, I need no documentation to relay what I know of his history. That's what interests you. Less than a decade has passed less than a decade had passed since the coming of the Flood, when the Crystal Tower first flashed into existence. Its summoner, the Exarch himself, became known to the refugees in Lakeland soon after. He welcomed all those who sought out the spire, be they locals who had lost their homes, or Voberites fleeing from their ruined kingdom, and together they did found the city which would become the Crystarium. Some thought to call him King, for he refused to share his name, but the summoner did not deem himself worthy of royal address. Thus did the people consider his scintillating skin so akin to the tower he had summoned, and bestowed upon him the title of Crystal Exarch. As for his true name, well, it would seem that is a mystery remain unsolved to his day. Yeah, it's not Garaha, or however the hell you say it. Cough, cough, cough. Now, what are you talking about with these other spells? Aha! There they are. Those are new. Ooh, I don't know where I could put those. I don't actually have a lot of... I have no slots free at the moment. I'll have to think about that. I could probably macro that into impact, which is probably what I'll end up doing. Look, I have too many buttons on my red mage, okay? I've resorted to macroing several things. I have to go take a picture really quick. BRB. And yet, for the record, Molinet is on my list because of Enchanted Molinet, or Molinat, or... I don't know how to pronounce any of these things. I gotta be honest, I'm not actually familiar with Adventures. I know they've implemented it, because they always do. Molyneux. I mean, shrug. Malabliglu. Lore, I was not told you'd awoken. A welcome surprise. Now if only the Exarch would return to us. He is taken by this rival of yours, was he not? Your companions mentioned they had an idea where to find him. So I bristled when they asked for patience. I did not understand their hesitation until I saw that you had fallen. Only then did I realize I had no business rushing ahead. Jesus Christ, my dad just called me fat. Oh my god. He said it jokingly, but still. Even so, the delay has been no less agonizing. In the moments before he left to join you in Kalusia, the Exarch entrusted me with a key. It opens a door in the ocular to a chamber known as the Umbilicus. Oh, goody. This room is the heart of the tower, into which the Exarch himself is... only the Exarch himself is permitted to enter. Well, gimme! Come on. He bid me allow none into the tower once he had departed. Only in the event that an army of eaters had descended on the city was to access the Umbilicus and awaken the defensive barrier. Never before had he left me with such instructions. But the battle with Vothri loomed near, and at the time I accepted the key without much thought. Since then, however, that moment is all that occupies my mind. When I recalled the look on his face, he knew some terrible fate awaited him. Tell me, Lore, I need to know what he feared, what battle you and your companions are truly fighting. No. This is, Forgive me, I trust in the Exarch, and I should not be voicing these doubts when he is not here to respond to them personally. But you have come to me with a question of your own, have you not? Ah, I see I'm not the only one who burns for answers. The time has come to open the tower's heart. Though we do not face an invasion of eaters, I suspect the city will be in far more danger if I do not gain the knowledge you seek. I wish the experience from these quests wasn't just burnt, by the way. Just side note. Come, meet me in the ocular. Or I guess I could just accept the teleport offer. So, it's time to turn into a star. And then meet Superman. We'll form kind of a partnership.
I have unlocked the door to the umbilicus. You are free to enter. Once you have what you require, I'll see it sealed once more. Until then, I will remain without.
I knew it. Nothing but books. Well, time to pull a Sephiroth.
A moment to collect my thoughts, I prithee. Thy true name is Grahatia, then?
Aha! Graha! That's how we pronounce it.
By thy claims, thou too art a native of the Source, though from an age beyond our own, when the 8th umbral calamity hath visited devastation upon our star. Thou hast, by subtle means, reached across the boundaries of time and space to unsow the seeds of catastrophe, ere its creeping vines drag our champion unto an early grave.
In essence, yes. A difficult story to swallow, I am sure.
I mean, who would you trust with such info?
I doubt not the veracity of thy words, not the account of thy coming, nor that of the fated calamity. Yet my mind straineth still to apprehend the enormity of this tale. Wouldst thou favor me with a gradual unfolding of its chapters?
Certainly. But where to begin? I should start with those great minds who survived the calamity. Sid Garland being perhaps the greatest. In hopes of staying the unending tides of war, he and his fellows pursued all manner of possible solutions. One of these was rooted in a theory which unified several fundamental principles discovered over the course of the Warrior of Light's adventures. It proposed a method by which one could enter the River of Time, traverse the rift, and leap between worlds. Perfecting that idea, however, was a work which consumed their lifetimes, and thus was it left to future generations to decide whether theory would be put into practice. But all the while, the world continued to burn. Hope was a feeble outpost, beset on all sides by thievery and misery and murder. People cried out in despair, "There is no hope! We are finished! Mankind is finished!" Then others raised their voices in answer. Though we be beyond salvation, those who came before may yet be saved. We will forge a crossroads and pave the way for a different future. By the wisdom of our forebears, we will prevent this calamity from ever having come to pass.
Wonderful timing there.
The fighting went on unabated, but some few took up Sid's research and labored to realize those impossible ideas. After 2 centuries of labor, their descendants finally succeeded in awakening the Crystal Tower, an integral part of the process, and, in doing so, roused its caretaker, me. By this stage, scholars had largely established the phenomena underpinning the rejoining, and identified the first as the shard which precipitated the 8th umbral calamity. This grand structure was already capable of storing the energies required to attempt the translocation. All that remained was to augment some few of its functions based upon the theoretical models of Sid. and his compeers.
And by means of such technologies didst thou affect thine arrival in the first, to an age before this star had joined with the Source.
Some while before, as it turned out. 'Tis all but impossible to predict how time will flow between one world and the next, and we missed our mark by almost an entire century. But this only worked in our favor. The Sin Eaters could not be defeated without the blessing of light, and summoning the only man who might stand a chance against them would require decades of preparation.
An undertaking of scarce credible endurance. That thou hast kept thy plan from falling into disarray these many years bordereth on the miraculous. Yet howsoever history be rewritten, thy present self was shaped by events which followed the calamity. Should said catastrophe be averted, the very skein of thine existence will unravel. Surely thou hast foreseen this.
Actually, I hate to interrupt, but thanks to what is clearly an example of Time Traveler's exemption clause, that's already proven to not be true, even though we're dealing with what appears to be Type 2 time travel.
I am aware of the consequences. 'Tis for that very reason Sid and his colleagues bequeathed their legacy as an offering, and not an edict. To give all of oneself for the happiness of others, and with no promise of reward. 'Tis a hard thing to ask. Harder still for those condemned to survive in a world which pitted brother against brother. Indeed, you are right to call the execution of this plan miraculous, though the force which held it together was nothing so inexplicable. It was him. The warrior of light has been our unbroken thread.
Damn it, man. Hi, Gum Gum.
Where others would stumble and fall, he would rise above. Where others would break and run, he would carry on. The Warrior of Light's tale is one of unyielding bravery. To tell it was to feel courage. To hear it was to feel hope. In the histories of a fallen nation was our hero hailed as its greatest ally. In the time-worn pages of a noble's memoirs were his deeds joyously retold. For many, these stories were the flame which warmed them through the coldest of nights.
You probably didn't see it, Velvedrix, but I grinned a bit at seeing the samurai blade.
And so it should come as little surprise that the plan found no shortage of volunteers, concerning as it did the Warrior of Light himself. It was their chance to add their own verse to the hero's saga. He was the lodestar that brought them all together, to send their final message back through time and space, to him. The light of your legacy was our torch in the darkness. Burn bright again, and live. I am merely the bearer of that wish, come to ensure it is safely delivered.
Wherefore sharest thou this burden with me and no other? What wouldst thou have me say?
That is true, Remedies Exion. This could be Type 3 time travel. I don't think this is Type 1, though.
That you will be my accomplice?
Although, actually, now that I'm thinking on it, it is entirely possible that this is Type 1, which would be very depressing if it's true.
'Twas you yourself who convinced me of your suitability when you spoke of how you learned of the Flood, and of your part in arranging Linfilia's journey to the First.
Poor Ryanje. I'm sorry. I know some people don't know my terms, and I insist on my terminology because I'm an idiot. Type 2 is one timeline. There is only one timeline, but thanks to time travel, it is malleable. In short, to visually demonstrate, so here's 100 years ago on the first, and this little dip right here, this is the, let's call this present-day beginning of Shadowbringers, okay? So what would have happened is, we have the Crystal Tower stuff right before this, and no, gum, although you do want to avoid it too much. You can have legal trouble there. And then Shadowbringers happened, except nothing happened. This is if this is type 2 time travel. So nothing happened except, oh my god, the 8th Umbral Calamity happens, and the fog happens, and everyone dies horribly. So then we skip forward a few centuries until it gets to the point where, like, okay, and they try to go back here, but they end up going back here. Actually, closer to here, let's be more accurate. Then they scooch forward a little bit until they connect right here with this point. The moment of connection is technically the moment at which the timeline is altered. But the mere fact that he went back altered the timeline as of that moment, meaning we now have the new timeline, the one we're seeing in game, and the one we've been seeing. That's type 2 time travel. One malleable timeline. Now, type 3 is multiple timelines. In short, and this is actually one of the reasons I despise this type of time travel so much, it would mean that the original timeline, where everything is doomed forever, is still doomed. That's timeline A here. But because he goes back, we now have timeline B, which is now a new segregate timeline from the original. So in short, if this is a type 3 situation, everyone in the original timeline is still screwed and doomed, and it's all death forever. All they've done is created a new timeline where they might actually try to alter things. In popular media, Terminator is one of the most common usages of the multiple timelines type. Whereas malleable timeline... Actually, I never can come up with a good example of malleable timeline. Now, I mentioned... I guess I'll cover this really quick. So, Type 1 time travel is my personal favorite, but that's mostly because it's the hardest to write for. It requires a lot of work and pre-thought. That is, time is a singular line. So to go back to our visual, stable loop. Everything that has always happened will always happen. Now, the reason I say this would be the most depressing here is because that means these events always happened. The interruption of us being dragged to the first always happened, and then the calamity happened anyways, and then everything was doomed forever, and then they went back and nothing changed because nothing was changed, because it's always changed. Makes sense? So in other words, if it's Type 1 or Type 3, this is a screwed scenario, either for everyone or for the other timeline. So I'm kind of hoping it's Type 2, aka malleable. As for Chrono Trigger, people are still debating to this day what types of time travel are being used in Chrono Trigger. I myself have given my theory that it shifts from the malleable timeline, Type 2, to the singular time has always gone this way, Type 1, depending on exactly... Or, I said that wrong. I said that in the wrong order. Switches from Type 1 to Type 2, sorry. Depending on what happens. FF8 is my favorite example of Type 1 time travel. All of the time travel that happens in FF8 always happened and always will happen. It is very much a singular construct of narrative. It's actually one of, in my opinion, FF8's best features. The plot is actually quite coherent. Really. Because it all lines up with how it always lined up, with how it always will line up. Now, we'll see. We haven't really broached time travel in 14. We'll see where they go with this. I really hope it's not one. I'm hoping this is malleable. I'm hoping this is... the Exarch is changing the timeline. Again, we'll see. Yeah, Alexander was weird, though. Because Alexander was kind of a self-contained loop. Which was basically Type 1 in its own structure. And honestly, I'd have to spend more time and effort really analyzing Alexander because... Yeah, Alexander also did say he could alter time. That is true. That is true. So, it was a medium, comma, but I think I can make it fit, period. I'll have to try it later when I'm not wearing my work uniform, period. So, yeah, Alexander, that's why I'm saying I don't want to talk about Alexander right now, because that was actually a fairly complex story. But I do want to say one thing. Type 2, and this is something that's been brought up in regards to Chrono Trigger as well, Type 2 can be made to look like Type 1. So, what I mean by that is if you are very careful in altering the timeline in a way that it looks like it always went the same way it always did, even though it doesn't, it is still Type 2 time travel. It's still the malleable timeline. But because events proceed, as they always did, by all observable respects, people can presume that that was always the way it was. Type 1 time travel. Closed loop. This is something that's been debated and argued several times in several works of fiction, actually. Star Trek brings this up in the episode Time Zero. Chrono Trigger, arguably, follows this same thought process. And there are several people who I've heard argue that the Alexander situation was a Type 2 being made to look like a Type 1 in a similar fashion. So, I have some chili to record, comma, so I'll wear it for that, exclamation mark. Either way, and yes, Dragon Quest XI was pretty definitively Type 2, with one notable exception, which was irritable and right at the end. Anyways, sorry for going way off topic here. I probably shouldn't speculate this early into a work, but you know me. Actually, you don't know me. Yes, Final Fantasy I. Final Fantasy I... Final Fantasy I is surprisingly complex for being such a simple game. And I think the main reason why is because they weren't really thinking it out when they first made FF1. It is worth noting that some of the complexities of FF1's story have come through since the PS1 release came out, the first proper remake of the game. That being said, FF1 is basically a Type... So, okay, FF1 is one of two things. It's either a Type 2, in which case what was happening was... We'll pull this out here real quick here. Is it just kept being altered. It was just being altered in the same way each time. So, in other words, basic general chaos theory or whatever was what allowed, during one of the loops, something to happen, right? So that's theory number one. Theory number two, now this is my theory personally, is FF1 was always Type 1 time travel. To explain that, the way this would work is, here's the past. Chaos shows up, tossed here by the Four Fiends. Chaos then summons the Four Fiends, and then kind of, is killed by us going into the past, right? So Chaos dies, we go back to the present, the Fiends have all this time to do their thing until we reach the beginning of FF1 proper. Then FF1 proper happens, we defeat the Fiends, and with their dying energies they send Chaos back to the past, and then we come back from having killed Chaos, and time continues. In short, the loop he created was only a singular loop. He basically started here, was tossed back, died, the end. To me, that makes a lot more sense with regards to FF1's storytelling. He presumed a loop that didn't actually exist because he had already gone through one of the loops. Anyways, moving on.
Your actions showed uncommon resolve. It was clear you were committed to the cause of saving this world. I knew I could trust you to choose the right path forward, even if that choice came with a heavy price.
What price?
You must speak with a silly manner of speech patterns.
When all is said and done, and the last of the Light Wardens lies slain, I will absorb their corrupted ether, and then I will die. Knowing what I know of your companions, not to mention your champion, they will try to stop me. But in saving one, they would save none. Therefore, I implore you to aid me in concealing my identity, and ensuring this tale ends as it must.
Correct, Nevermore. Type 2 of the 3 is the only type of time travel in which people would cease to have ever been born, basically. Because in Type 3, they were born in the other timeline, and in Type 1, all of these events always happen, so nothing's changed.
To this end, I would have you take what I have told you of the Calamity, and make of it a portent. A prophetic vision you beheld in the swirling chaos of the Rift.
Is this truly thy wish?
Yes, I want you to lie, and stop wearing my beard.
History remembered the Warrior of Light, as I knew it would. And I will suffer no other to rescue the champion whose star has charted my course. I will see this tale to a happy end, my friend. There has been enough tragedy.
I'm not going to answer that one, Omega Legion. Regular detective novels. Gum gum.
Careful now. If you lose control again, the light could claim you for good. Although it's probably only a matter of time before you succumb to the change in any case. What do you mean to do?
I like these 3 options here. By the way, just to explain something in case I didn't make it clear, part of the reason I mentioned that this might actually be a Type 1 situation, the idea here would be that after all of that work and time and effort to design this time travel and to go back in time, that they failed and the 8th Umbral Calamity happened anyways and everyone died anyways. And you might be thinking, well, how is that possible? Well, you'll notice if things just kind of stopped here, regardless of what future patches happen, that's exactly what's going to happen. We have no solution for our light poisoning, and the end, basically. I think I'm going to go with option 3 as well. Up, it.
Then we should be on our way. Dacian mentioned the Tempest, did he not? That's the stormy seas around Calusia to you. His lair must be down there somewhere, hidden beneath the waves.
Now, this is going to sound pathetic. That's true. Remedies Exion. That is true. That's actually something I've brought up several times, is that we don't have a long-term solution to this. Anyways, one thing I want to add here, and I know you're going to all call me pathetic for this, but I was kind of hoping we would just have the ability to withstand that kind of power of all of that poisoned ether. And I want to explain why. It's not just because I want to be the super badass, although I do, and I'm not going to lie about that. But it's also because, to me, it would make a weird amount of sense if, thanks to the, for lack of a better way to put it, the pattern of what we are is what allows us to be the hero that we have been. And thus, because of how patterned our nature is, we could basically correct the poisoned ether within us. And that's kind of what I was assuming was going to happen. I was obviously wrong. We couldn't contain it. But regardless, moving on. Okay, I have some questions about the Tempest. The Tempest? That's the seas. You need a flyer. There's the animation again. Do you mean to leave this right moment alone? I'm not sure. Nay, I will not stop you. Go with your blessing. I'm sorry, Collapso. It makes sense that I'm weak. I am an astrologian. We'll see what they do with this going forward. I admit, at this point, I don't really know how we're going to fix this. I don't know of anything in-game that's been presented to date that can fix what we have, except for the incredibly obvious. And nobody's even mentioned the incredibly obvious yet. So either it's not actually possible, and I'm an idiot, or they're trying to, pull the wool over my eyes by not mentioning it, and they'll be like, oh, hey, why don't we do this incredibly obvious idea? Fiction does that a lot. I suppose, to be fully communicative, the incredibly obvious is we just spread it out. We have tons and tons and tons of poisoned ether in us. Just spread it out amongst a few willing people who will all be able to carry a portion of it. Boom. Guardians of the Galaxy ending. I mean, come on. No, suicide I don't think would solve anything because it would just all eject from us, just like it does from a Light Warden. And while I think that might be possible to do with relatively lack of danger on another world, we currently have no method to leave the planet. Like, if we had the ability to transport to other planets right now, okay, that might be a feasible option. We don't. The Crystal Tower, we don't know how to function the Crystal Tower. We don't have the ability to access the Rift innately. We can't even control the Echo, for God's sakes. Although if we really are an Emeratian, or Emiratian, or however you're supposed to say that.
Word reached us of thy recovery, and thus did we gather with all haste. Ah. By thy looks I gather thou hast gleaned that which I came to tell thee.
Urianger has shared everything with us. The Exarch's true identity and purpose.
I was actually thinking, how many other people were there at the Crystal Tower other than Sid and Nero? I don't remember. It's been a while.
I offer no excuses.
That's what I thought. I know Doga and Une were there, but they kind of sacrificed themselves. So yeah, none of the other Scions were actually present at the Crystal Tower. That's the point I was trying to reach.
When I agreed to aid the Exarch with his plans, 'twas in full acceptance of the condemnation I would face when my duplicity was laid bare. Yet it is not rancor, but resolve that I sense in thee. Thou art fully intent upon walking thy path to its end, art thou not? If thou canst forgive my deception, or, failing that, set aside thy displeasure for a time, I do beg leave to follow thee. What strength and wisdom I possess are thine to command.
I forgive you. Let's go. I love that option. I mean, I could be like, I am a danger to those around me. Or, no more lies. Or, I forgive you. Let's go. I'm going with the first option.
I thank thee. Doubt not but that I will do all in my power to repay thy kindness and fulfill the Exarch's wishes.
I'm sorry, but I don't think this is a good idea.
I mean, it isn't. We're flailing at this point. I'll be real. We are flailing at this point. So I've mentioned... I'm going to pause for a second. I've mentioned several times how I wish... Hang on, Pillars of Snow. How I wish that MMOs would take bigger risks when it comes to their storytelling. I mentioned the idea in Warlords of Draenor over in World of Warcraft, how I wish we had actually been chopped off from Azeroth, right? I actually mentioned the same thing here. I wish we had actually been chopped off, at least for a chunk of time, from the rest of the world while we were here. I mean, LFG would probably work, but you get the idea, right? I get why MMOs don't take such bold moves. Those would upset people, but I do feel like such things... I've been playing MMOs since 96, I think. 1996, thereabouts. I've been playing MMOs for a damn long time, is what I'm trying to say. And they all kind of toe the line. With extremely few exceptions, they all follow the same beaten path. All of them. And I do wish that some MMOs would be brave enough to try things and change things. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why are you bringing this up now? Well, Remedy's Exion actually gave the idea earlier, because this is the idea that I mentioned myself earlier. I would love it. I would actually legitimately love if we died here, and in order to continue playing in the future, we'd have to play some other character. Probably, with a legacy character thing, because losing all those levels would be horrible. But we could do a Kryl type situation, if nothing else, to spoil FF5, right? Because that would actually be pretty awesome, I think, if they were brave enough to move in that direction. Especially since that also opens up a lot of storytelling potential of us playing, well, the number 2, right? The follow-up, the pitch hitter, the backup guy, or girl, as the case may be, rather than playing the great and glorious hero of light that everyone will remember forever and venerate forever. And of course, we could see what impact the warrior of light has on people and society and individuals going forward, now that they're gone. Now, I don't mistake me. I totally understand why they wouldn't do this. But in the meeting room, if I was in the developer's room, I would push for this kind of an idea, because I really do think there's a lot of potential in that. Basically, in gameplay terms, what would happen is all of your stuff would carry forward into a new character. You'd effectively get a character creation screen, and you could do whatever you want with it. You could even make yourself look exactly the same if you really wanted to. But in lore, you would be a new character. You'd have all the same jobs at the same levels, you'd have all the same gear, all the same currency, all of the same unlocks. Gameplay-wise, you're moving forward with the same level of progression. Kind of like that, yeah, Remedy's Exion. And yeah, permanent character death has been done very well in the Final Fantasy series a few times. Not often, admittedly, but a few times. Anyways, with Papalymo... God, I don't know. I'm trying to revert my brain back to that, because that was a bit ago. I liked almost everything about it, except for the thing that caused it. Because it just was kind of an out-of-nowhere, stupid... To put it into modern parlance, Papalymo died to stop a terrorist attack. That's what it felt like, put simply. And there's something almost brutal and senseless about that, which of course can have good storytelling potential. I do think they did a decent job of showcasing it. My biggest regret is that, despite the fact that Papalymo died, Ida, or whatever the hell her frickin' name is, didn't really showcase any of the impact of that. It only came up like 2 or 3 times across Stormblood. In my honest opinion, that should have been of a non-stop pall hanging over her. I don't want her to whine about it constantly, but it should have tainted her actions throughout the course of her arc. Instead, well, we got Lise, or whatever her name is, in Stormblood. That's a good question, Mashia. That's a very good question, and I don't have a good answer for that off the top of my head. That would be cool, Nightforger, I agree. Honestly, I think you're right on that one, Remedy. I like how Rax is totally ignoring all this stuff I'm saying here, by the way. I know, you're in a conversation. It's just funny, because I figured Rax would have something to weigh in on this idea. Moving on.
Leaving the Crystarium, I mean, with or without Urianger. What I did for you won't last forever. There's no telling when the light will break free again. Please, you must stay here, at least for a little while longer. We will find a way to cure this, I promise you.
How can you make promises? We don't even know where to start.
Alize, please. You know Reen was only trying to help.
Of course I know! I know only too well! But making promises you have no way of keeping is not a kindness. It's a lie. Plain and simple.
To quote a YouTube channel, unkeepable promises. Ding.
We've all searched high and low for an answer, and every one of us came back empty-handed. I am not about to stand in his way now. Not after failing him in his hour of need. No! The least we can do is...
We will go with you as well.
Okay, guys, that's actually a really bad idea. Keep in mind, I don't have a solution here. This is not a, I'm going to fix things. This is a, I'm going to go accomplish this before I worse than die.
There is naught to be gained by standing still.
Indeed, we have exhausted every other avenue. Lead, and we shall follow. If there is any hope to be found, then we will surely find it at your side.
Are we all in agreement then?
Is there aught we can do to help?
No.
Though we may not know the whole story, we do know you're in for a fight. And while the Exarch's away, it falls to the rest of us to see the Warrior of Darkness is given a proper send-off.
You told them!
No. Well, not in so many words.
Aye, we didn't need it spelled out for us. When the night sky appeared over whichever place you went to, it was harder not to put two and two together.
I mean, he's got a point.
From the moment I heard that you and the Exarch shared the homeland, I had my suspicions. Long had he been waiting for a certain someone to arrive. And I knew at once that it must be you.
Exactly. When he went up to meet you, it was clear it was no ordinary visitor. That spring in his step spoke volumes. I could feel his excitement.
Me too! That's right!
Yeah.
Fair, it is Exion.
We do not fully understand where you or the Exarch hail from, or why you've all done so much to protect us. But we are deeply grateful nonetheless. So, if there is anything at all we might do to aid your journey, you need only name it. What would you have of us?
You might have invited them to join us, where there are not so many. But come, they are waiting. What is your will, O Warrior of Darkness?
She enjoys that far too much. That is possible, Max Time. I am, of course, speculating in a vacuum, but it is literally the only solution I've seen. Other than, like I mentioned, popping off to the void and letting it go there. I like the last one, too. I think I'm going to go with that one. Hope for the best. Prep for the worst. Yeah, but we can't. That's the problem, Max Time. We're planet locked at the moment. That's why I didn't even consider that one. I suppose the solution then would be to try and figure out how to get the Crystal Tower working, you know, between Urianger and Y'shtola, and try to figure out how to make that thing actually function, so that we could then pop off and basically die. But whatever. Thou didst plan to commandeer Namaro for thy journey to the open sea. I fear the following dive unto Emmet Selk's underwater abode would drain even thy legendary stamina. Thus, during the convalescence, we consider the most efficacious method for reaching the depths of the Tempest, and I believe we've arrived at an elegant solution. We're going to get a bunch of crafters together to make an airship submarine. Yet, ere we discuss this step, I suggest thou dost conclude such pressing business as remains to thee in thy Crystarium. Once the sea closes above our heads, we are unlikely to surface again till our grand deed is done. That is true, Rasalisu. But that does not, in my opinion, preclude the possibility that it could send a single individual out, rather than moving the entire tower. Now, that's based on a lack of information, not a absolute of information. What do you think? Does this feel like a good cutoff point? Because then we could just do everything in one bundle when we come back. I know this is actually technically our second cutoff point today, but you know. Alright, we'll go ahead and chop it then.